everyone. So I just finished caucusing here in Olympia, Washington for Bernie, and I'm inspired to make this video. Saturn just went retrograde yesterday, and Saturn has a lot to do with the structures, the rules, the parameters, the boundaries, how we create conditions and set order and structure for every aspect of our reality. And to a significant degree, we live in a world, we live in a society where in most places the rules, the structures, the governments, the parameters aren't with respect to nature, to individuality, to what is good for all. A lot of them are repressive and they are not supportive. They constrict that which is natural. So within the Saturn archetype, we have this idea of ethics. And we make choices, we do this, this thing where we navigate our life, and we always have to reference this inner guide that allows us to determine. Hello.
How are you?
Awesome, I'm making a little video.
Keep making it.
Great to see you.
Good to see
You
you.
were talking to the column.
I am. And it's recording me.
Yeah!
So, we often think of this idea of doing the right thing according to not necessarily an inner standard, but according to an external standard, like following the rules, being a law-abiding person. And then what happens is status quo will say, here's what's okay. Here are standards that exist in this world that are allowed, they're okay. And for the vast majority of people on this world, in this planet, their own sense of appropriate, of rightness, of ethics won't come from an inner knowing, it'll come from the external validation. The world, the society, my parents, my government, they're saying this is okay, and they're saying that's not okay. So we find this false sense of security by fitting into a status quo that validates and affirms these external structures. And most religions have been like that. They give us these set of rules, do's and don't do's. So whenever a planet goes retrograde, it's really this time where that function within consciousness is becoming more inverted. It's reflecting, it's reviewing. And the intention, or one of the intentions of retrograde, is so that the momentum that we're creating in our life doesn't just run on autopilot. We're not just going along with what we're used to, how we normally think, how we normally interact. But we take this time to introspect and reflect on, well, what's actually true? What's more genuine? We become more individuated and tuned into the essential nature of that function, stripped from what we're familiar with and what we're used to. And if we can invite, I love retrograde because it's very internal. It brings us inside if we will embrace that. So the Saturn retrograde is, in a sense, withdrawing from the momentum of the status quo. And if the status quo has been sort of operating in this place where it's not ethical, oftentimes the Saturn retrograde cycle will bring up, shifts in the status quo where there'll be more revolution or more change or more rebellion or greater shifts or controversies or issues with moralities will come up and things like that. So just kind of, being a part of this beautiful movement right now where our brother Bernie Sanders is just holding this beautiful space for the sake of all of us. And this soul in many ways is very reflective of the Saturn retrograde energy. He says in his speeches, think outside of the box, a box being Saturn. And so, but he's running within a political system. And he's calling for revolution within the political system. So I just want to, offer that perspective that Saturn retrograde, it's really an invitation to find out what is right inside of you. What are your own ethical guidelines? And here's the thing, because there's a certain status quo and normative to acting in ways that are not considerate, not with respect to the good for all, the good for nature, the good for our body, the good for one another. It's very easy when we witness these things in the world to either become completely disenfranchised, right? To say, well, forget that, I don't want to be a part of that, or, or to judge, point your fingers, like they're being unethical and I'm just gonna disconnect and do my own thing. Or it's very easy to kind of respond to that with our own unethical behavior and to justify it, right? To do things that are, to break the law or to break our own inner law. because of our own outrage at how the system is operating. And there's no right answer in terms of how do we respond to the nature of this world and all the things that are happening. But the biggest thing that I would want to point to is, and it's important to point out, it's important to say that right there is hypocrisy, or that's unjust. It is important to call these things out and to name it. But the perspective that I want to offer is what's most important is that we take all these things that are happening, and a lot of the voter fraud and in many places across the country in the United States, the Democratic Party has clearly made it very difficult for people to vote. And that's a very intentional voter suppression mechanism, and you can argue that if you want, but in the different things that I've seen in the various states, it feels pretty clear that sort of the MO here. The establishment has their own agenda, and there's a normative pattern of manipulating to achieve their own agenda. So to respond to that with, okay, what can I do? How can I respond to that? How can I feel empowered? It's great, but the core is to allow ourselves to really develop and align with our own sense of ethics. How do I want to live? How do I want to treat others? What is important to me? One of the things that I think makes Bernie Sanders such a profound role model, it's why I admire him so much, is because he is very much in the world. It doesn't matter whether he's a politician or not a politician. It's a fact that he's doing what is right for him. He's following his path, and he's defining from within his own standards of right and wrong. And that's the point. It's not about political involvement or not political involvement. It's not about the forms or the actions that you're taking. The structural reality that you're involved in doesn't have as much significance as, are you being honest with yourself? And Saturn retrograde and Sad is really about, be honest with yourself, be genuine, be sincere. It can be easy for Sagittarius to put on, to lie to itself and say, this is who I am, this is the role that I'm going to play, this is what I believe in. And to, stand fast for some sort of value or belief and to convince others of it. But is it really your truth? In fact, most people will conform to the consensus reality of the world around them. They'll take that on. But Saturn retrograde really invites us to slow down, to not be so quick to say, well, the group's doing this, or I'm going to agree with this, to actually think for ourselves. What's true for me? What's true for me? One of the yearbook quotes, or a quote that I put in my yearbook when I was in yeshiva in high school, was "B'makom she'ein anashim tishtadel lihodish," and the literal translation is, it's gendered. It's in a place where there are no men, or there are no people, strive to be a man. And what it means is when there are no, when people aren't acting in their humanity, act humanely. And I remember once in high school, some kids were playing this prank and they put a dead chicken on the table. And I was so angry. But for whatever reason in that moment, there was a total knowing of what was right. And it wasn't useful to point fingers and to blame, to even get them in trouble. Like, none of that mattered to me. What mattered to me was sanitation. Getting that chicken off the table and doing whatever I needed to do to make sure that table was clean. So I took it off the table, covered up with towels or water on it, whatever, and got the janitor immediately. I didn't even have an agenda to tell on anyone or get them in trouble. But what stuck out for me in that experience was this feeling of knowing what was right and being completely committed to it. And the blessing that I want to offer for all of us is, on our journeys and during this Saturn retrograde time period, we can really become awakened and strengthened in really knowing what we live for, what is important to us, who we want to become, how we want to demonstrate our truth. And it's never ever going to be about judgment. It's never ever going to be about better than or worse than or more aligned or ethical than someone else, more spiritual than someone else. When we're living our truth, there's a gratification and a sense of rightness in just doing that. So I just want to thank Bernie Sanders for walking this path and showing all of us. I'll tell you this, I'm in this to get him elected. I'm completely committed, but it's unconditional. If he's not elected, it's okay. I'm not attached to it. And what I observe in him, in his character as well, is he isn't attached to it either. He's fully into it. But I know from his character and from what he said as well, that even if he doesn't win, he's not backing out. He's not going to stop fighting for what he believes in. He's not going to stop living according to his highest, deepest knowing of what is right from within. And so he's not going to stop, no matter what happens, following that inner guidance. And what liberation to know that no matter what changes around us, no matter what happens, we can still live as we truly believe in. We can still follow our beliefs. We can still live for what we know to be right within us. And whenever we do that, it doesn't matter what the context is, it's always going to be inspiring. We're always going to set an example to others just through the sheer fact of us being honest with no other agenda other than just living according to what we inwardly know to be true and right for us. Okay, much love to you all.